Banks and ATMs were flooded by those trying to withdraw other denominations. The banknotes, now declared illegal, account for 85% of the cash in circulation. The goal, to tackle corruption, and new high-security notes are being issued. New Delhi just announced the old notes will be accepted for another 72 hours for household bills and basic fees. Let's bring in Ankur Patel. He is the co-founder and chief investment officer at R Squared Macro. Let's start there. This is just pretty remarkable. It's creating a lot of chaos, leaving some people holding the bag, so to speak. I mean, suddenly money you had yesterday is worthless overnight. What's the reasoning behind this?
Well, it really is a pillar of Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister's agenda to really tackle corruption, tax evasion, and money laundering. And it is, as you mentioned, it's very abrupt, very dramatic, but it had to be that way because had Narendra Modi announced it in a month in advance, it wouldn't have achieved its purpose.
Wasn't there a smoother way to get this same result? And do you think it might hurt Modi's standing? I mean, there's a lot of common folks who are going to be hurt by this, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it does hurt Modi's popularity. It does kind of erode support for his party over the next couple of months. But I think at the end of the day, despite the short-term pain that I think a lot of local Indians and even Indians around the world that have rupees in their possession, I mean, they certainly will be hurt. But in the long term, it is very good for the Indian economy. It will allow more of the money to be part of the traditional banking system. It will actually support India's fiscal health in the long term. So this is going to be very long-term positive for India.
But the Bombay Stock Exchange crashed. What about the overall initial hit on the economy? What do you think about that?
I think it's about right. I think what happens is that as Indians scramble to get rid of the rupee notes that they have in possession, it's going to hurt consumption. They're going to buy fewer goods. If you look at India, about 80 to 85% of the transactions that occur are actually done in cash. Now that's very, very different than an advanced economy like the US or the United Kingdom, where about 25% of the transactions are done in cash. So given that so much of the transactions is still very much cash-based, it's going to hit demand, which means it's bad for Indian equities, which is why the Sensex is getting hit as hardly as it has.
You make this point. I mean, if I'm in India and I'm going to go purchase something, it's cash transactions. This happens on a daily basis, probably throughout the day if you're doing business. So talk to me about small business. How are they going to be affected?
Well, for them, it is such a large hit for them. Most of their business is done in cash. And it's going to force, in the short term, it's going to force them to move to the traditional banking system. So they'll either have to take credit, which a lot of Indians don't have access to, or they'll have to wait until the new Indian rupee notes, the 500 rupee note that will come out and the 2000 rupee note, both with much more advanced security features. They'll have to wait for those security notes to come out before they see business as usual.
You mentioned it's a shock to the system. It had to be done this way in an attempt to curb corruption, counterfeiting, and funding terrorists. Give me a sense of just how bad that problem is.
So about 30% of India's GDP, potentially maybe more, is part of the vast informal shadow economy. And it's not just illicit activities, it's not all money laundering, but it is money that the Indian government cannot tax because they just cannot track it. So you have all this lost tax revenue for a government that is in very much of need of tax dollars. There are a couple of problems at hand, but what the biggest problem right now that exists is that the Indian economy is very much a black market shadow economy, and more of it needs to be part of a traditional, transparent banking system. And that's the major objective that Modi has.
So how much of a hit does the black market take? I mean, does this shut it down? Does it injure it, wound it? Do they figure workarounds? I mean, what's your sense?
This certainly cannot solve the entire black market problem, but in our view, and I think a view of a lot of analysts around the world, is that this is a very bold, a very transformational move. It's one of the strongest moves that we've seen in any emerging economy, really ever. So from our perspective, this is the first of a series of moves that potentially could erode the shadow economy that India has. We think it's a great move. It's from an economic perspective, is a short-term hit for a very substantial long-term gain.
And short-term hit for Modi, but you think he rebounds from it?
We do, yes, we do believe that, and it will be a little bit of a communication challenge. But he's been a very popular prime minister. He's done a lot for the Indian economy over the last 2 years, and he's waited this long to announce this measure. So, from our perspective, the timing is right. The Indian economy is on on pretty solid footing, and this is the right time to make such a move.
All right.